So recap time. So we have seen that there are different sampling methods to create training mini batches in GNNs. And so to lower the GNN compute budget, one can adopt one of the following sampling strategies, and each has pros and cons. So let's look at these strategies together. So first, the node sampling. So the node sampling, we randomly select a subset of target nodes, all right? And randomly means they may not be connected. We just randomly select from the graph and then define the batch in that way, and then work back through the network, adding a subset of nodes in the receptive field at each stage, okay? So this is, for example, graph sage. There is also variance reduction GCN, pin sage. So there are lots of published works and methodologies aiming to improve the strategy of node sampling in graph neural networks. So the good news is that basically node sampling, it reduces the computational cost by training on a subset of nodes rather than training on the entire graph compared to batch stochastic descent. And it makes it, a bit, I would say quite suitable for large graphs, at least compared to when training on all, right? Taking the whole batch, the whole data set. Now, in terms of memory efficiency, it allows for a more efficient memory usage, particularly, as I said, when dealing with kind of, these huge graphs. And the disadvantage of these methods is the redundant computation. So we have seen, because since we're sampling randomly, we may end up with a lot of overlaps between shared neighbors that we need to recalculate their embeddings over and over again. So, and also because of the recursive nature. So the recursive nature of node-wise sampling, it brings a redundancy in for calculating the embeddings. So if two nodes share the same neighbor, the embedding of this neighbor has to be calculated twice, all right? And we have seen this right here, the orange and the green, all right? And now let's go back. So the second method is we have seen in so far, so is the layer sampling. So in the layer sampling basically, it takes in, it samples the receptive field in each layer independently. So the keyword here is independently. All right. So this addresses the node increase in node sampling as we pass back through the graph. However, so we can control that. It addresses this problem. It may remove the overlap a little bit, the redundancy. But the problem is that there are lots of problems. So we're going to see that in a bit. But there are many examples, like, for example, fast GCN, adaptive sampling, the layer dependent importance sampling, the L2 here, GCN. So there are lots of works, and it's an ongoing area of research, how to improve the layer sampling methods. So computational efficiency, in terms of computational efficiency, the Layerwise sampling, it avoids the redundant computations in node sampling, so that's better than the first one. In terms of memory, it allows for more efficient memory usage. It's the same thing. I mean, it's a bit better than the node sampling. And the key disadvantage here is that it disrupts the local structure of the graph. So it may disrupt the links connecting neighboring nodes between two consecutive layers due to the random independent sampling in each layer. Okay, so this may create isolated nodes and sparsifies the graph and may not be very beneficial to the final loss optimization and parameter learning. Okay, so the last one is subgraph sampling. So for subgraph sampling, we have, so we randomly draw different subgraphs. So this randomly draws the subgraphs or divide the original graph into different clusters. And these are trained as independent data samples. So each batch will be trained, will be optimized, we'll calculate the loss for each batch and update the parameters at each batch. And they are separate, so there is no kind of overlap between them. So we're breaking down the graph into smaller graphs, and an example is a graph Saint and also cluster GCN, which we have seen. So in terms of pros, actually, the subgraph sampling significantly reduces the size of the data and at each iteration. So the size of the data we need to process each iteration, and this will makes it very feasible and suitable for large scale graphs. So it is scalable because we're breaking down the graph into many subgraphs. So in terms of scalability, this is surely, like, I'd say this is highly scalable compared to the other methods, the layer-wise sampling and the node-based sampling methods. So it can easily, it allows to scale, I wouldn't say easily, by breaking, the graph down into smaller graphs. Now, in terms of disadvantages or cons, we have a complexity in the sampling and the design of an effective graph partitioning or subgraph sampling method. So how to actually cluster these graphs. So remember, the clustering method depends on the similarity between the edges on the features. And doing the clustering may not be very reliable. So the quality of the clustering or the quality of the partitioning will influence your learning. And this could be complex and not very trivial, I would say. So, and it also may require additional computational resources if the graph is huge, and some clustering algorithms such as manifold-based learning algorithms that learn similarities between different samples for clustering, they are not scalable. So which means as the graph increases in size, you cannot do clustering. So you get an outer memory. So you cannot run the clustering algorithm. So yeah, so this is an overview, a recap on the GNN sampling